have you missed the rainbows of life? The sun shining in your face because you've been so downtrodden? Join me as I share a very personal scripture in this episode that moves all of us from a brokenness to a hallelujah of hope. In my college years, I spent several months walking around on crutches. And let me tell you, balancing crutches as you're walking on ice is a skill. Of course, it got easier when I got myself some good arm muscles and I carried less weight around as well. That did help. Because it was winter, I had little ice picks that I could flip down on my crutches so that I wouldn't slip and injure myself even more. It seemed a bit dangerous, both the icy pavement and the ice picks as I hobbled along. And I really had to concentrate so hard on where I would place my next foot and the crutches. It took a lot of concentration. And I got very good at spotting cracks in the pavements or uneven surfaces as I moved along. Being so focused on the ground before me, it actually got me interested in reading about another woman in the Bible who was so focused on the path before her as she shuffled along. That story since then has been one of my favorite encounters with Jesus in the gospel. We find her story in the Gospel of Luke. And I'm inviting you to just read this story with me. It's chapter 13 in the Gospel of Luke, verse 10 to 17. This is how it reads. On a Sabbath, Jesus was teaching in one of the synagogues, and a woman was there who had been crippled by a spirit for 18 years. She was bent over and could not straighten up at all. When Jesus saw her, he called her forward and said to her, "Woman, you are set free from your infirmity." Then he put his hand on her and immediately straightened up and praised God. Indignant because Jesus had healed on the Sabbath, the synagogue ruler said to the people, "There are 6 days for work, so come and be healed on those days, not on the Sabbath." The Lord answered him, "You hypocrites! Doesn't each of you on the Sabbath untie his ox or donkey from the stall and lead it out to give it water? Then should not this woman, a daughter of Abraham, whom Satan has kept bound for 18 long years, be set free on the Sabbath day from all that had bound her?" When he said this, all his opponents were humiliated, but the people were delighted with all the wonderful things he was doing. Here in this text, we have a real drama. It is often one of those overlooked passages in the Bible because there are so many stories of Jesus healing various people in the Bible. But this is an amazing story of a miracle of healing that Jesus does. So Jesus has so many healing stories in the Bible, but I want us to have a special look at this story. Let's go and do an in-depth analysis of this passage. It is so jam-packed with insights and themes and emotions that it is hard to believe it is only 7 verses. In these 7 verses, we meet this woman. Her back muscles are twisted in an uncomfortable position. Like a rusted hinge, her posture is bent over, unable to do anything without experiencing pain as her nerves pinch together. If you have ever had back pain or suffer from chronic pain, you know how painful it can be just to stand up straight. So for nearly 2 decades, this woman has been trapped in this malformation. It's like somebody has twisted her back, leaving what once was upright and standing straight, downtrodden and stuck in a state of disability. Her movements are not free as the wind that sweeps in her face. She probably grinds her teeth with each painful step as she shuffles along to the synagogue, something she does on Sabbath. She is so bent over that she does not see the blue sky or the white clouds floating by. All she sees is a dirt brown road paved with yesterday's litter. On her way, All she can see is people's feet rushing along, and maybe even probably pulling a couple of staring children away. But despite being so different, she seems to be ignored. And as she finally makes her way inside the synagogue, she finds a place among the women at the back. This is where women would sit in the synagogue, as men and women would worship from different sections. Previously, a pastor in the church that was in an old synagogue, and there was a balcony that had served as a section for women. So this woman that we are reading about here, she shuffles her way and finds a spot near the back, so she doesn't have to endure more pain as she walks further. This Sabbath, Scripture tells us, it is Jesus that teaches. Though the opposition against Jesus continues to rise at this point in his ministry, apparently he is still welcomed into some ministries. It says in the text that when Jesus saw her, he called her forward. First of all, in a crowd, would you notice somebody at the back, bent over? Secondly, we see here that already here Jesus is breaking the rules and regulations of worship of what it was done in that day. Now, theologian Charles Spurgeon comments this way. What he says is, Jesus might have called to her from a distance and said, "Be healed," but he did not, for he wished to show his special sympathy with such a sad case of suffering. And in doing so, he obsessed the tradition and regulations of his time that surround Sabbath and worship. Firstly, he was a Jewish man who singles out a woman in a public space. This was only not done, but it was definitely seen as unacceptable. Secondly, he calls her forward to come over to where he is. Now remember that we read that Jesus was actually teaching, so he would be there up front in the synagogue, the one that was reserved for the more holy part, where women were not permitted to enter. This is to where Jesus calls her, calling her up to the front, to a space that was reserved for the teachers of the Torah. We also see here that Jesus is a man that takes actions. He's not waiting around for the woman to cling to his robes in this story, or that she sends a petition through the right disability organization. Neither is he waiting for someone else to point to her, or as custom would have it for that time, a male relative to approach him and speak her case. That would indeed have been a more correct way. No, Jesus sees her, and Jesus sees her with his own eyes of empathy and compassion. How powerful that as he interrupts his teaching, his thoughts doesn't automatically go to speculate, why is she so bent over? And reason that, well, some people are just simply poor or old or disabled. Some people just, in the lot of life, they just have poor health. Or perhaps she has deserved this. She might have been a big sinner. Not Jesus. Neither does Jesus ask if she has done her duty as a good wife, mother, or daughter. Jesus sees a person and then he acts. He acts immediately. He doesn't start discussing her morals or call one of her male relatives to discuss her situation, as was custom, we know. Jesus speaks directly to her and her need. Woman, you are set free from your infirmity. This sentence, just a couple of words, are the real dynamite in this story and causes more than a little bit of a stir. But let's first see what's happening next here in the text. I believe actually in this text here, it is important that it is not until after that Jesus has declared the woman free does he lay his hands on her and straightens her back. You can almost hear how the bones are creaking and cracking as the bent over spine and twisted spine is straightened out. Think about the impact of what the words of Jesus would have meant. I'm convinced that it is crucial that Jesus first sets her verbally free, free from all that binds her, all that tramples her spirit down, all the emotional and psychological scars that had formed inside of her. And then Jesus touches her. He, a Jewish teacher, touches a disformed woman. First of all, as a Jewish man, you did not touch a woman. She could be so unclean. She could have a disease that you didn't know about. She could be menstruating, which also deemed her unclean. So that he touches her is so radical on massive of levels. But Jesus reaches out his hand and touches her and straightens her up. What a sight. When we contrast this healing story to that of the 10 lepers that we read about later in Luke 17, let's just look at that story in comparison. Their story is Luke 17, verse 11, we read, "Now on his way to Jerusalem, Jesus traveled along the border between Samaria and Galilee. As he was going into a village, 10 men who had leprosy met him. They stood at a distance and called out in a loud voice, 'Jesus, Master, have pity on us.' When he saw them, he said, 'Go show yourself to the priests.' And as they went, they were cleansed. One of them, when he saw he was healed, came back, praising God in a loud voice. And he threw himself at Jesus' feet and thanked him. He was a Samaritan. Jesus asked, 'Were not all 10 cleansed? Where are the other 9? Has no one returned to give praise to God except this foreigner?' Then he said to him, 'Rise and go. Your faith has made you well.'" In this story with the lepers, we see that they themselves call out to Jesus to be healed. And then they went to the priest to get a clean bill of health. But only one, a Samaritan, a foreigner, returned to thank Jesus for healing him. Now back to the story of the bent-over woman. In this encounter with Jesus, she could then easily have faded into the background or disappeared in the crowd after Jesus had healed her, and we would hear no more. But no, we see that she immediately starts praising God. She does not need a degree in theology to know where credit is due. She does not need to understand or have a discussion from the doctors to hear what has happened. Her instinct and her heart swells with praises to God, for she knows to whom the glory goes. She is a broken hallelujah personified. And can you imagine that this is what she, who had been bound and bent over for so long, would spend the rest of her life doing? Praising God and sharing with others the miracle of what God had done in her life? How could she not? Still, all is not well in the story. We know that whenever something happens that is not inside of the box of people's perception of what is right and wrong, someone will always get upset. When people's understanding of tradition and how things should have been done gets shaken or questions, inevitably there will always be someone who is offended, who feels trampled upon, or who believes it is up to them to defend their perception of what is correct, just to keep the standard going. Whenever something different is happening, we are also very quick to judge and offer our truth on the matter. And here in this text, we see that it is a synagogue ruler who are used to define what is right and what is wrong for everyone else. He really gets his feelings hurt. He is angry at Jesus because Jesus here is displaying power. When we go back to verse 14, we read that indignant because Jesus had healed on the Sabbath, the synagogue ruler said to the people, "There are 6 days for work, so come and be healed on those days, not on the Sabbath." The ruler of the synagogue is just infuriated. He does not see a woman. He does not see a person that is in need of healing. He sees a rule, and a rule that is broken. But he doesn't get to be a ruler by being stupid. He is tactical here. And instead of confronting Jesus directly, he blames the woman. This is a tactic of power. If threatened, it is always easier to blame a defenseless person or a marginalized people group. Even though in this story, it is not the woman who has asked to be healed. She has not forced herself into the male part of the synagogue. But according to the ruler, her mere existence is a provocation, and therefore she is to be blamed for this disruption and disregard of rules and regulation. He had a worldview. He had a worldview that we see there in verse 14. This is what he actually means. What the ruler here is saying is that healing is work. Secondly, you are requiring a male to work on the Sabbath. Woman, you are presumptuous. Your problem is not serious. You should be aware of the law. You, woman, you are at fault. Of course, healing is work if you are a Jewish ruler. He means that she could have come any other day. I mean, after all, come on, she's been bent over for over 18 years. What would one more day mean? What the ruler really is after is that he blames Jesus for breaking the Sabbath command. And the problem the ruler has is actually Jesus. Here it is that I just love how Jesus responds. He doesn't just say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I understand your concern," or diplomatically start discussing the law. He stands up to the ruler, making absolutely no apology about what he's about to say. He doesn't soften or mince his word or make it nice. "You hypocrites." Jesus knows the ruler of the synagogue is more concerned about the rules than people. That's why he say, "You hypocrite," because the ruler himself would value his donkey and ox more than the importance of a woman, let alone an older and crippled woman. After all, an animal was a source of income. And Jesus here mocks the shallowness and callousness and illogical of the ruler's interpretation of the law. The ruler sees a rule, and it is a rule that has been broken. It is rules and not people that the synagogue ruler was concerned with. But Jesus here demonstrates the contrast between a rule-orientated religion and a religion concerned with people. This new concern for people that Jesus is demonstrating here is not just a concern for the important people. It is not just about the cream of the hierarchy in the society that concerns Jesus. And he uses his healing of this woman to make a very vital point, that those whom society ignores and casts aside are important to Jesus. Jesus reaffirms here that God sees no virtue in suffering. Nothing can be gained by consigning a fellow human being to one more day of unnecessary torment. Here the message of the story is saying, "Woman, you are freed. You are freed from your infirmity. You are freed from your stereotypes. You are freed from the limits of the law, from society's restrictions. You are freed from your fears, from your internalized sense of inferiority. You are not to be ignored because you are a woman. Your disability is not to be associated with sin and evil. You are not to stay bent over, burdened with unspeakable loads. You are something. You are somebody. You are important to me," says Jesus, "and therefore to God." Jesus is showing a new way forward of how to regard women and of what is appropriate on the Sabbath. He turns what people know to be tradition and the way things just are upside down and demonstrates that God is in the healing business. I suspect that Jesus deliberately planned to shake up the establishment. He knew the impact it would have. Still, God loves people. I mean, after all, he created all of us in his image. And as a relational God, this story of healing just goes to show that there is no one unworthy of God and his healing power. Jesus then goes on to add the last insult to the ruler, calling the woman a daughter of Abraham. Nowhere else is a woman referred to as Abraham's daughter. And we know that Jewish men refer to themselves as Abraham's sons. It is important to identify yourself as Abraham's heir. However, women were not privileged to be identified as such. It was indeed a privilege to be a descendant of the greatest forefather in Israel. So it's a compliment here that Jesus elevates a second-class citizen, a disabled woman, to the same status as the ruler. No wonder the ruler gets upset. But Jesus' message here is simple. Even if society categorizes people into different levels of hierarchy, all people are important to God. No matter where people have labeled them, everyone is seen by God, and He calls each one of them to Him, regardless of how bent over we are, regardless of what has bent us down, it being physical illness, disability, finances, stress, cancer, depression, relationship problems, sex, addiction, bullied, or low self-esteem. Whatever it is, we all have in some ways been bent down with our baggage. And it is us that Jesus calls to Himself to lay His hands on us and straightens us that we can stand tall in faith. But first, He sets us free from what binds us, what makes our soul heavy. The story could have ended here in verse 16, but it concludes in verse 17 when He said that all the opponents were humiliated, yet the people were delighted with all the wonderful things that Jesus was doing. What a powerful conclusion. Not only did the woman rejoice and praise God, but people, the onlookers, the bystanders to this drama, rejoiced at what Jesus was doing. The rulers were humiliated, and we can see them just slinking away from the crowd, plotting how to get back at Jesus. It is a powerful story. A battle between vision and rules, between what is a priority, man-made rules or people's needs. Like the woman, we all have things in our lives that bend us, that hinders us from standing tall. You might, like me, live with pain. It might be physical or emotional, or perhaps you have spiritual wounds that need healing. I know what it's like from my own life to live in constant physical pain. I can't recall the last time I lived pain-free. Now, I'm not one of those who is blessed with health or high level of energy, but I'm blessed with a strong body that has survived a lot. And in my life, sometimes God has healed, other times He has not. For me, this story is so much attached to who I am as a person. It's key in my personal understanding of my Christian identity, my understanding of God and His priority, and a passion that has kept me inspired and reminded me throughout all my struggles of God and His world being so very different than society dictates. When I was in my 20s, I was hobbling along on crutches. I had somewhere along the line playing volleyball injured my knee and was unable to walk without crutches for months. The pain was tough, but it took several visits to the hospital before I was sent for an X-ray, and then everything moved fast. The X-ray revealed a tumor in my lower femur by the knee, and the biopsy declared it to be cancer. I was happy attending college in England, but was flown home to be with my parents in Sweden, and the prognosis was not good. Hospitalized and bound to the bed and unable to move freely, I learned how dependent I needed to be on the nurses and the staff around me for very, very simple, basic daily tasks. Because I was an independent girl and there was nothing I couldn't manage by myself. But at this point in my life, I learned to be dependent on God. I was told there in the hospital that gray November day that it was not likely I would be coming back to college. Yet it was there in my hospital bed that my experience with God, and God told me, hey, I'm not done with you yet. And one Sabbath, as I was giving leave for the weekend, I was able to, in my wheelchair, attend a small little country church where one elderly charismatic lady sat next to me, and unbeknownst to her of what was wrong with me, she placed her hand on my bad knee and prayed. My next surgery gave me an all clear. The tumor was no longer cancerous. And although I kept coming back for 3 years to have all the rest of the tumor removed, God had reached down and woven His story of redemption into my life. Yes, it took me years to share my story because I was plagued with survivor's guilt as the girl in the bed next to me had her leg amputated the day I left the hospital. Am I restored to perfect health? No. Does it matter? Not really. For I know that whatever the mess that is my life, illness or not, God's redemptive story comes through me in my story. And that is the story of the bent-over woman that Jesus calls to him. And as the story with the bent-over woman, Jesus has also called me up front to the pulpit. That is where he heals me. And that is why I have no choice but to respond yes, as God calling me into his ministry. My prayer is for you that this passage will speak to you, that whatever binds you and tramples you down today, that Jesus is telling you to come to him, that he can set you free. Straighten your back again, stand tall, and be his daughter or son. I'm just going to invite you to join me as I pray. God, in our bent overness and brokenness, thank you that you are able to put your hands on us and make us stand up tall again. That we can stand tall as your daughters and your sons, and that we can continue because of you to praise your name in our broken hallelujah. Amen.